Welcome back to Flying Potion. We are going to read for you today from chapters 7 through 9 3/4. Chapter 7, A Winged Messenger. Polly couldn't wait any longer. If Heather wasn't available to help her out, she would embark on this fact-finding mission on her own. Polly didn't like to worry Scratchy, but she felt like his help would be useful. She'd used that ointment that Clark Witherspoon had given her, and Scratchy's paw rash had cleared right up. That Clark Witherspoon was a dream, Polly thought, recalling that it had been quite some time since she'd had a dream person all her own. While Polly was conjuring in her mind, Scratchy was dreaming of his own manifestations. Mindy Smatherton was salivating at Dakar's door. Dakar was feeling a very strange sensation of needing a wardrobe change. He kissed Abigail with the same passion he always felt for her, the one that made her knees weak and her heart flutter. "Meet me later for dinner?" he asked, since he didn't want to assume her availability. "Yes," she said, then backtracked. "Oh, wait, it's Coven night tonight," she said, wondering if any of the Spectre and Book Coven members would even be there. They'd been a little lax in their meetups this season, but surely everyone would be interested in preparing for the Day of the Dead parade. Spectre and Book always had a very mesmerizing float in the parade each year, but they'd barely talked about it this month. Abigail wondered if she should still keep Spectre and Book going. So many of its members had moved on to other things, or were just too busy lately. Abigail recalled how great she felt every time the group got together, and she made a promise to keep the coven going, even if she had to switch members out to those who were more available. She couldn't keep being the one who did all the work. That just wasn't balanced. Let's see, there was Polly and Scratchy, Abigail and Rainicourt, Tamber, and Abigail realized that this small group was the problem. They needed more witches, and she decided that by this time next season they would have their 13 members, and it would be up to those who attended regularly to help locate the others. More work to do, Abigail sighed as she added this to her ever-growing list of priorities and projects. She realized how grateful she was to even be here in this moment, and her anxiety over all the priorities dissipated. It would all work out just fine, she said to herself, knowing if she flowed along with her life, that everything would happen just when it was supposed to. Dakar drove up the little side driveway and parked in the back of the cottage by the garage. He unfolded from the cramped car quarters and made haste to get inside, shower, change, make a few phone calls, clean up around the house, and get his gear together for a quick fishing trip out in the harbor. He'd invited Clark Witherspoon to join him, even if Clark hadn't been his first choice. Dakar had few close friends, but a large circle of acquaintances and people he liked to hang out with in order to basically keep tabs on the energetics of the places around Rockaway Point and Tessa Lock. He was, after all, a senior agent at Bringers of the Light HQ, and as such he had bigger responsibilities and more to shoulder than some of the other agents. While Abigail was having her coven meeting, he'd be greasing palms and schmoozing at the pub with the locals to keep a beat on the happenings about. Mindy heard a car door open and close, and she made herself even more seductive by pacing a glamour about herself. A little spritz of Midnight Madness cologne and a pouty smile made cherry red by Seduce Me or whatever lip stain, and she felt the mood was perfect. She'd lit a few candles up in the bedroom, and she'd snapped her leg garter high up on her thigh with a little start at the smarting of the snap against her skin. Oh, he wouldn't and couldn't resist her now, could he? Dakar sensed something strange about the house. He'd had that same feeling he recalled a few nights ago at the Black Tongue Inn. He hoped that silly room service girl hadn't followed him home. Girls, ladies, and often guys just couldn't resist him, and although he was well aware of this, there were times when it still caught him by surprise. Click-clack, Mindy's pointy thigh-high boots moved across the master bedroom upstairs. Click-clack. She was a little nervous that he might not recognize her. Dakar stepped inside and smelled the overpowering perfume and the candles. He tapped his hands 3 times on his wand that he carried in his coat pocket. The wand skittered out of his coat and pointed the way upstairs. Dakar asked it what was there, and the wand bounced 3 times, which meant not danger, but something else. He let his guard down a little. He wouldn't need his light sword, he guessed, placing it back in the sheath by his side. Click-clack, click-clack. Heels, he figured, walking upstairs. Maybe Abigail had come to surprise him with a little indoor naked hide-and-seek. But no, she would never wear a scent so unappealing. And then a slight breeze surrounded him. A voice whispered in his ear. "Come, lover, let's get back to old times." It teased his earlobe with an etheric tongue. Dakar tensed a little at the teasing, but he was also used to these types of seduction attempts, as he'd been expertly trained to avoid covert attempts to steal his affection in the guise of rendering him unable to respond as required. He was a master agent, we keep reminding you, so technically he should always be acting like one. Mindy tickled the back of his neck. "Dakar, come home, dear," she twanged, as his ears shrunk back at the shrill tone of her voice. An energy hand touched his bottom, and he reeled about to the ethers around him. Well, time for him to put this to an end, he thought, although again he was reminded that the old Dakar loved this sort of thing. Random paramours teasing him by using their energy to seduce him. He wasn't that warlock any longer. And so he deftly silenced his ego while simultaneously swiping the entire cottage with a smell, maybe, but a spell, meant to drive out whatever or whoever was around. And before him, wrapped in energy bonds, stood Mindy, looking dejected in her thigh-high boots, pouty cherry-stained lips, and disconcerting perfume. But before Dakar could swish her away and out of Rockaway Point for good, she said 2 words. Glockenspiel directive. Chapter 8. Glockenspiel directive activate. Mindy and Dakar were instantaneously transported somewhere else. It seemed to be very cold inside some old dark house. Dakar looked around and readied his hand on his light sword. He mentally reached out to High Court at HQ. "I may be compromised," he said telepathically. "Hold for more details." High Court, who was deep in a council meeting about the needs of the Dolphin Kingdom off the coast of Japan, pinged back, "Let me know if I need to take action." He directed his thoughts to the Angel Guard, who waited for just these types of situations where they were needed to intervene and assist the agents who were in dark trouble. Mindy coughed a little, and a little puff of smoke came out of her mouth. "Dang it," she said, coughing again. "That wasn't what I wanted." Her intention had been to whisk Dakar away to her witch's cottage, where she had a whole seduction scene waiting for them. But as usual, her spell had fallen flat, and rather than being whisked away to her cottage, she'd taken them to the WBAT 44 AM haunted house. A ghost burst out of a side closet, startling her and causing her to cough out an even larger ball of gray smoke. Dang it, she thought to herself that she really needed to get her magic under control. Dakar finally realized that there were no real threats here after a large plastic hand covered in blood writhed across the floor in front of him and then flipped over and sputtered off. A witchy cackle came from under what appeared to be a fake staircase. But Dakar knew this house well. He'd rented it for a while before buying his old bungalow. It belonged to an old dead sea captain who never came home one night after having been shipwrecked up at Tessel Lock that one night when the lighthouse's bulb had burnt out and the lighthouse keeper had had one too many lemon toddies. The sea captain was called Old Brick, and his boat, the Whispering Water, had been used to bring seal pelts from the upper islands in exchange for whiskey and other sundries that were really needed there. Old Brick would take the pelts and sell them for way too much money, never caring about the poor seal souls who'd been sacrificed for this. And on one such evening at the cottage, Dakar had found a whole closet of pelts up in the attic. He recognized some of them as Selkie pelts right away and had called on his guides to help him locate the earthbound souls belonging to the pelts. Scores of sad women had made their way to the cottage to retrieve their pelt and their freedom of going back to the ocean where they belonged. Yes, Rockaway Point and Tessa Lock hold strange magic, my dears. Dakar finally realized there were no real threats here. Mindy Smatherton had simply rucked up another spell, as he'd figured she'd do in that dross of a book. He moved to the door, but not before Mindy popped up in front of him again. Dakar, you know you can't resist me. She coughed smoke again, but this time it was pink. Quite frankly, my dear, I don't give a narwhal's ass, he'd said as he pushed by her and out onto the porch. A crowd had gathered for the opening of the haunted house, and there were tailgate parties and people eating from a few food trucks that had come from the coast to try to boost their earnings. Dakar, suddenly hungry, realized he hadn't had anything to eat since that meal with Abigail. Ordered a goat cheese and marinara pasta bowl from Tessa Lock's Pasta in Your Face food truck run by Giuseppe Vertucci, a young expat from Sicily. Mindy didn't know what to make of what had just happened. She surely didn't have her man or her dignity for that matter. Perhaps she needed a new plan? Chapter 9. A Haunted Night Out. Sonny and Rory ran pell-mell through the corn maze. I bet you can't find me. Sonny wheeled around only to be led down a dead-end path. I'll find you, and when I do, Rory laughed, thinking how he'd scoop her up in his arms and run with her out of this confounding maze. Just then a blast of siren sounds went up from somewhere just outside the maze. 10 minutes! You have 10 minutes to get yourself out before we send in reinforcements! The voice bellowed over a scratchy speaker system. What could that mean, Sonny wondered. What kind of reinforcements would come into the maze? Her mind quickly calculated all the possibilities. Dogs rabid with hunger, fake ghosts on poles who tried to scare you into believing that magic was real, or worse, some scary guy in a bloody scarecrow costume who'd get all up in your face and make you feel like, well, you know. But Sonny, Rory, and anyone else in this seemingly unwinnable maze for that matter didn't have to worry. The corn maze keeper wasn't sending any dark forces, scary ghosts, or rabid dogs. It would only be Mr. Albie Chalmers, the Argyle Inn's proprietor and currently the most eligible single bachelor around Tessa Lock, having divorced Maggie Chalmers in a witch council ceremony that finally had unbound the couple after several lifetimes together. No, there would be no hijinks tonight in the corn maze if Albie could help it. He'd send in his old bloodhound Arcturus to gently lead any stragglers out of the maze and straight to the apple cider and popovers cart he'd set up at the exit. Arcturus could find anybody, dead or alive, as long as his nose had been properly activated. And this time he'd been given a dash of this and a smattering of that cider and popovers to know just where to bring any bedraggled maze walkers. Rory and Sonny emerged right at the same time at the final connection point in the maze that would allow them to reach the exit. A yellow arrow pointed nicely to the exit point, and the couple laughed and ran towards the exit, happy to be out of that place for now. They hadn't really been scared inside the maze, only discombobulated and separated for a while in order to test their own inner guidance systems while they'd been apart. They hugged and high-fived, ate apple popovers, and planned the drive back to Rockaway Point with the intention of reaching the haunted house before it closed. Chapter 9 3/4. Haunted Houses or Haunted Memories. WBAT 44 AM, your station for all the hits. Seastar's voice rang out over the crowd that had gathered for the sponsored haunted house at Old Brick's bungalow. Rory and Sonny arrived just in time to catch the tailgate party of their good friends. Beer, wine, grilled burgers, vegan alternatives, hot toddies, apple pie, and a special cart sponsored by the Autumn Festival Committee featuring all the dishes from the festival entries earlier that month. The crowd gathered and ate, awaiting darkness, which would come very soon given the autumn season. Sunny decided to try a piglet tart. No, there were no real piglets in this creation. One would get a basted barbecue tart with a special dipping sauce, and right at the middle of it, towards the very last bite, a golden ticket had been baked inside. The winner would always be the one who finished the tart, procured the golden ticket, and then took said ticket to Grand Slam Barbecue in Tessa Lock, where they would be provided with all the fixings for a barbecue Sunday lunch. Grand Slam Barbecue had been making piglet tarts since old Ginny Jenkins married Seth O'Hanrahan 10 years ago. Ginny having brought the recipe from Arkansas after having met Seth and declaring that he was her one. She'd up sticks quite literally as she lived in the mountains with no electricity and quite a few real piglets of her own to cook up with Seth in Tessa Lock. Grand Slam Barbecue had been born, and that was that. Sunny's piglet tart smelled amazing, and she took the messy plate and went to sit by the car, eating and waiting. First bite of drizzly, delicious sauce dripped down her chin as she wiped delicately with her napkin. Bite 2, 3, 4, and just when bite 5 should have revealed the golden ticket, Sunny stopped. Rory ran up out of breath from throwing footballs back and forth with his mates. He surreptitiously grabbed the last bite from Sunny's hand and devoured the tart, stopping only to realize the paper in his mouth. "Hey, that's my ticket," Sunny fake pouted, knowing all along she would have given Rory the golden ticket anyway.